Erases tracks and buries mistakes, and erases tracks and buries mistakes, and doesn't care about your reasons or your plans or how much you thought you had left to do before winter came. Rowan Fletcher was 31 years old and had learned to read weather the way some men read scripture. He knew this storm would last 3 days. He knew the temperature would drop to 15 below before dawn. He knew that nothing alive should be outside tonight unless it had no other choice. He came up the final slope to his cabin with his shoulders bent against the wind and his breath making clouds that the darkness swallowed whole. The trap line had given him 2 rabbits and a fox. Enough. It was always enough or not enough. There was no in-between in this life, no margin. Just the daily calculation of what you had versus what you needed, and the quiet acceptance that sometimes the math didn't work out in your favor. The cabin sat where the tree line thinned and gave way to open country, a small structure. One room with a stone hearth and a sleeping corner and a work table scarred from 7 years of use. The roof had been patched 4 times. The door hung straight because he'd taken the time to do it right. The window shutters closed tight against the cold. Home, if you could call any place home when you'd chosen it specifically because it was far from everything that mattered. He saw the shape at his door from 30 yards out. Too large to be an animal, too still to be a tree. Just a dark mass against the darker wood of his drying rack hunched there, like something that had crawled up from the bottom of a long fall and couldn't make it any further. Rowan stopped. The wind howled. The snow stung his face. He stood there with 2 rabbits and a fox and looked at the shape and thought about all the reasons a man might choose to keep walking past his own door, keep going into the white darkness in the killing cold, and let whatever waited there sort itself out without his involvement. He had built this life on the simple principle of not being involved. Not anymore. Not after everything that being involved had cost him. But his mother had taught him about herbs and healing. His mother had taught him that knowledge without compassion was just information taking up space. His mother had been dead for 10 years, and he still heard her voice in moments like this, gentle and insistent and impossible to ignore. He walked forward. The shape resolved itself into a woman. Not a human woman, an orc. Female, he thought, though it was hard to tell under all the layers of rags and mud-heavy cloth. Tall enough that even slumped against his post, she would have been looking down at him. Broad in the shoulders and arms, in a way that spoke to fundamental power, even diminished as she was by cold and hunger, and whatever had brought her here. Her skin was dark green, the color of river moss in shadow. Her face was strong-featured, angular, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved rather than grown. Small tusks curved up from her lower lip. Her eyes were so dark they looked black in the stormlight. Those eyes fixed on him as he approached, wary, exhausted, but still calculating, still assessing threat and distance and options. She spoke before he could. Her voice was lower than he expected, rougher, like something that had been used hard and put away without maintenance. "I have nothing to offer you." The wind tried to steal the words, but he caught them. "No coin," she continued. "No trade, only a request to not die on your doorstep." She said it with the particular dignity of someone who had never begged for anything and wasn't entirely sure how to start now. The kind of pride that stays intact even when everything else has been stripped away. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Snow accumulated on his shoulders. The rabbits hung heavy from his belt. The fox was already starting to freeze. He thought about the food stores he'd calculated down to the pound. He thought about the winter stretching ahead. He thought about how the math had already been tight for one person and would be impossible for 2. He thought about his mother and the herb garden and the way she had always made room even when there wasn't room to make. He stepped aside and opened the door. The first night she slept like someone who expected to be attacked. Or maybe like someone who had been attacked and was still waiting for the second wave. Rowan gave her the bed in the sleeping corner behind the rough wool curtain. He took his mat to the floor by the hearth. He banked the fire and lay down with his back to the warmth and listened to her breathing in the darkness. It never settled into the deep rhythm of real sleep. It stayed shallow, guarded, the breathing of a sentry on watch. Sometime past midnight, she cried out. Just once, a short, sharp sound that cut through the cabin's quiet like a blade through cloth. Rowan lay still. He didn't move. didn't call out, didn't ask if she needed anything. Sometimes the kindest thing you could do for someone was to pretend you hadn't heard them break. The breathing behind the curtain stuttered, then steadied, then continued its shallow pattern until the gray light of dawn began to seep through the gaps in the shutters. Her name came on the third day. She gave it like she gave everything in those early hours. Carefully, with the air of someone who had learned that every piece of information could be used against you if the wrong person was listening. Thessa, she said. Just that. No clan name, no title, nothing that would place her in any larger context. He told her his name was Rowan. She repeated it once quietly as if filing it somewhere specific. He gave her the chair by the fire. He gave her the last of the dried venison from the shelf and half the pot of grain porridge he had been planning to eat himself. He made strong willow bark tea and watched her drink 3 cups without stopping. She ate with focus, the kind of focus that meant she hadn't eaten in a very long time, and her body was too far past hunger to remember how to pace itself. She didn't speak while she ate. He respected that. Didn't ask questions, didn't make conversation. Just let her take in what she needed while he tended to his own business at the work table. When she finally set down the empty bowl, she looked at him for a long moment. He kept his attention on the trap spring he was mending, gave her space to watch without feeling watched in return. Why, she asked. He looked up. Why what? Why let me in? Why feed me? Why give me your bed? Her voice was flat, stating facts, not seeking answers. You want something in return. It wasn't a question, it was a conclusion. The only conclusion her experience had given her the tools to reach. Rowan set down the trap spring. He looked at her directly. No. She stared at him, waiting for the rest of the sentence, the qualifier, the terms and conditions. He didn't give her any, just went back to his work. The cabin was quiet except for the fire's crackle and the wind outside testing the shutters. After a while, he heard her move, heard the old bed frame in the corner creak under her weight, heard her settle, heard her breathing finally gradually shift into something deeper than that shallow sentry rhythm. He worked until the light failed. Then he added wood to the fire and stretched out on his floor mat. Outside, the storm that had been building all day finally broke. Snow hissed against the walls. The wind found every gap and crack and weakness in the structure. Inside, the fire burned steady. 2 people breathed in the darkness. One had learned to expect nothing good from strangers. One had learned to stop looking for good in anyone. Both of them, for different reasons, had stopped believing much in hope. That was about to change. Slowly, in small ways, the way ice melts at the edges before the center gives. The pattern established itself without discussion. Rowan rose before light and checked his trapline. He came back with whatever the forest had given him. He made breakfast, simple food, porridge or stewed meat, or both if the traps had been kind. He worked at his table in the afternoon, skinning catches, mending equipment, the repetitive tasks that filled the hours of a solitary life. Thessa watched. He was aware of her attention the way you become aware of heat from a fire you're sitting near. Present, but not intrusive. She was assessing him. He understood that. She had been assessing everything since the moment she opened her eyes, probably long before that, and it would have felt strange and uncomfortable for her to stop now. He didn't take it personally. On the 4th day, she began to move around the cabin with more ease. The stiffness in her left side was still there, but less pronounced. She had been hurt. He had known that from the first night, from the way she moved. Ribs, he thought. Maybe something deeper. On the 5th day, when he came in from the morning trap check, he found her standing by the woodpile behind the cabin. She had brought in 2 armloads and stacked them against the hearth wall with almost excessive neatness. The kind of neatness that spoke to military training or deep habit or both. He looked at the wood, then at her. She met his gaze with that same wary calculation. That was helpful, he said, the same tone he would have used to note that the weather was clearing. Thank you. Something flickered across her face. Not quite confusion, more like the feeling you get when you reach for something in the dark and it's not where you expected it to be. She didn't say anything, just nodded once and went back to the chair by the fire. That night he made stew. She came to the hearth herself to pour her own bowl, reached past him instead of waiting for him to serve her. The decision to take up a little more space in the room, to claim a small piece of autonomy, he pretended not to notice. But he noticed. and filed it away with all the other small things he was learning about her. The way she always sat where she could see the door, the way she woke at the smallest sound, the way she held herself like someone who had commanded others and wasn't sure what to do now that there was no one to command. The first real conversation happened on the 8th day. He had come in earlier than usual because the snow had started again, and he knew from the sky's color that it was settling in for a long stay. He was hanging his coat and organizing his cages when she spoke from her chair by the fire. "How did you come to live here?" Her voice had that same careful formal cadence, the rhythm of someone for whom English was learned not born. So far from others, so alone. He considered the question while he finished hanging his coat. He wasn't used to talking about himself, mostly because no one asked. But he could see in the asking a kind of reaching. She was still cautious, still wary, but she was reaching across the space between them with the only tool available. A question about him because asking about herself was too exposed. He told her the short version. Born in Derby, the small town 2 hours south through the forest. Mother a healer. Father dead young. Mother dead when Rowan was 21. Stayed in town for 3 more years trying to make it work. Failed. Found this place. Built this life. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I understand needing something different." The way she said it carried weight. The truth of someone who had needed something different so badly that they had walked into a stranger's storm and risked dying at his door because dying alone in the cold was preferable to whatever they were running from. Rowan sat down on the floor near the fire. She had the chair. That had become their arrangement, and she had stopped objecting to it around day 6. He looked at the flames and asked without pressure if she was from far north. "Yes," she said, "very far north. I've heard the mountains up there are something to see." She was quiet for so long, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said, "There is a light that happens in the deep winter, a kind of low blue-green that settles over everything. Makes the snow look like it's lit from below. There is no other light like it anywhere." She said it like something she hadn't thought about in a long time and had surprised herself by remembering. "Sounds beautiful," he said. "It is." They sat with that. The fire moved. Outside, the snow fell with the patient persistence of something that had all the time in the world. He made tea. She came to the hearth and poured her own cup. That small thing, the reaching past him instead of waiting, the claiming of space, the decision to be a little less of a ghost and a little more of a person in this small room. The days accumulated. 1 week became 2. The routine deepened into something almost comfortable. She woke before him most mornings now and had the fire going by the time he got back from checking traps. He cooked breakfast, she ate, then she found things to do. Small repairs around the cabin. The kind of maintenance he had been putting off because it was easier to live with minor problems than to fix them alone. She replaced the leather hinges on his storage chest, oiled the window shutters until they moved without squeaking, fixed the part of the roof patch that had been lifting in the wind by finding exactly the right weight of stone and placing it with precision that spoke to engineering knowledge he hadn't expected. He came back one morning and found her on his roof. Just standing up there on the ridge-like height was nothing to her, pressing the lifted patch flat and securing it. The sight of it was briefly arresting. This enormous green-skinned woman balanced on his modest cabin with complete confidence, and him standing in the thin winter sun, looking up and feeling the strange sensation of a life that had been entirely predictable, suddenly containing something it hadn't contained before. She came down and looked at him. He said with complete honesty that he had been trying to fix that for weeks. She said it had needed the right rock for a weight. She held up the stone she had chosen, flat on one side, heavy, roughly the size of his 2 hands pressed together. He looked at the stone and agreed that it was exactly right. She set it by the door and went inside. He stood there another moment in the cold sun before following. On the 15th day, he came home with a good catch. 3 rabbits and a grouse that had flown into one of the snares. Good catch days had that effect on him. Simple pleasure. Reliable as weather. He found her at his work table with his knife and 2 pieces of scrap wood. Carving something. She looked up when he entered, and there was a flash of something defensive in her eyes, like a child caught doing something they weren't sure was allowed. He set his catches on the counter and came closer to look at what she was making. It was a small figure, rough but purposeful. 4 legs, stocky, body large head. He couldn't quite tell what it was yet. "What will it be?" he asked. She paused, weighing whether to answer. Then she said, "A guardian. In my language, we call them stone guardians. Dogs made of mountain rock. They are supposed to bring safety to a place when they are carved correctly." She said it like she was translating more than just words, like she was trying to cross a gap between concepts that didn't map cleanly from one language to another. Rowan looked at the small, rough figure and then at her. Something shifted in his chest, the feeling of a door that had been closed a long time, getting its first breath of outside air through the cracks. "That sounds like something my mother would have believed in," he said. She looked at him with sudden focused attention, the kind of attention you give to things that surprise you. He began skinning the rabbits and told her in pieces about his mother's herb garden. Not the botanical names, but the personal names she had given to individual plants. The small rituals she had built around them. The way she talked to the struggling ones in the morning when she thought no one was listening. Thessa listened to all of it without speaking. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "In my clan, the matriarch keeps the old names. It is considered the most important part of the role. Not the laws, not the battles, the names. Because you cannot remember what you cannot name, and you cannot protect what you do not remember." Rowan stopped his knife work. "That makes sense to me. I have not spoken about that with anyone in a long time. I know how that feels." They cooked the rabbits together. She had watched him cook enough times that she knew where things were, knew his process. Somewhere in the middle of it, she made a quiet comment in her own language. Something about the way he was cutting the root vegetables. Too thin, he thought she was saying. They would turn to mush before the meat was done. When he looked at her, she seemed to realize she had spoken in a language he didn't have. She switched back to English with an expression that might in different light have been embarrassment. "What was that word?" he asked. She told him. It meant something like the right thickness for things that cook faster than what they are cooked with. There was no single word for it in English. He tried to say it back. He did it badly. She said it again slower. He tried again, still badly. She said it a third time, and this time she was trying not to smile. He said it a fourth time, worse than all the previous attempts. She made a sound, short, sudden, completely unguarded. Not quite a laugh, but the beginning of one. The part that escapes before you can catch it. She covered it immediately, but it had happened. He pretended he hadn't noticed because he was learning that she needed that. But he filed it away. She had a laugh somewhere in her. He didn't know if he would hear it again, but he knew it was there. That night they ate together. He cut the vegetables thinner than she thought he should. She adjusted them without comment. This became, without discussion, the shape of their cooking together. The 21st day brought the wolf. Rowan had been aware of it for 2 days before that. Tracks near the eastern trapline. The broad pad prints of something large and hungry. Wolves ranged widely in winter following game, and his traps occasionally brought him into their territories. He was careful about this, respectful. They had a rough coexistence that neither party was enthusiastic about, but both accepted as the terms of living in the same space. This wolf was different. This wolf had been watching the cabin, drawn by the smell of smoked meat in his cold storage. He had seen it on the 20th day, just a glimpse through the trees, a large gray one, yellow eyes and patient hunger. On the 21st day, he stepped outside in the thin dawn light and found it standing 10 feet from his door, just standing there, looking at him with those yellow eyes, calculating. The patient assessment of a predator that had been cold and hungry for a long time and was trying to decide if this opportunity was worth the risk. Rowan reached slowly for the bow he had brought out with him. Not aggressive, just cautious. Establishing terms. His hand closed on the wood. The door opened behind him. Thessa stepped out. She moved past him close enough that her arm brushed his shoulder and looked at the wolf. What happened next was something Rowan would remember for the rest of his life with perfect clarity. She wasn't armed. She didn't need to be. She stepped past him and looked at the wolf with a complete absence of fear that was different from bravery. It wasn't courage overcoming terror. It was the simple, settled confidence of a person who had spent their entire life being the largest and most dangerous thing in any room and had never needed to question that fundamental truth. The wolf looked at her, assessed, recalculated. She made a sound, low, guttural, something that came from deep in her chest. Not a threat, not a growl, an acknowledgment, a communication between things that understood each other's nature. The sound a predator makes to another predator that says, I see you, I recognize what you are, and I am more. The wolf stood there for a long moment. Then it turned and walked without hurrying back into the tree line. Rowan stood next to her in the cold morning air. He looked at the place where the wolf had been, the prints in the snow, the space it had occupied. I have never seen anyone do that, he said after a moment. Wolves respect presence, she said. They test to find the edge of a thing. When they find it is further than they expected, they adjust. She said it like it was practical information. Not something extraordinary, just fact. He looked at her profile. She was watching the tree line, her jaw set, her breath making clouds. And she was in that moment completely herself. Not the guarded, careful creature of the early days, not the slow-thawing mystery of the middle weeks, just herself, certain, at ease in her power in a way she wasn't always at ease in his small cabin with its human proportions. He thought, I have known her for 3 weeks, and I do not know her at all. And also I have known her for 3 weeks, and I know her better than I know most people I have known for years. Both things were true. Neither made complete sense. She turned and found him looking at her. He looked away first, back at the tree line. We should go inside, he said. It's cold. She agreed that it was cold. They went inside. Neither of them spoke about what had just happened, but something had changed. He had seen her true nature. She had let him see it. That was its own kind of trust. On the 28th night, she couldn't sleep. Neither could he. They were both awake in the dark, and eventually he gave up pretending and pushed himself to sitting. Do you play any games? He asked. She said she did not understand the question in that context. He got out the small game board he had carved years ago out of boredom and the need to do something with his hands. A simple strategy game played with stones, rules he had mostly invented, in which he suspected had several logical flaws he had never bothered to fix. He lit the tallow lamp. They sat on opposite sides of the board. He explained the rules. She asked sharp questions about corner strategy that revealed she had understood the game better from his explanation than he did from having played it for years. They played 3 rounds. She won the first easily with a systematic approach he had never seen. He won the second by accident when she overcommitted to a center position. The third game took longer. He was beginning to see the pattern in her thinking. He said her clan must play strategy games like this. She said they did. The game was different, more pieces, different rules. But the underlying logic was the same. She had been trained in it from childhood, the way one is trained in anything that might determine whether people live or die. Rowan stopped moving his stone. He looked at her. She had said it matter-of-factly. The way you say something so deep in your experience that you've stopped noticing how it sounds to someone who hasn't lived it. He asked carefully what kind of decisions felt like that. She was quiet, not defensive, thinking quiet. When you are responsible for people, she said slowly, for their safety and their food and their futures, you learn quickly that every decision has a weight. Most people only carry their own weight. When you carry everyone's weight, the decisions cannot be shared. You can take counsel, you can listen, but at the end, the thing that is decided is yours. The thing that follows from it is yours. There is no one to divide that with. She paused. The lamp flame moved. Shadows shifted across her face. There is a specific loneliness in that, she said, not because you have no one around you, because the weight cannot be put down. Ever. He was listening with complete attention. She seemed to notice this, seemed unsure what to do with it. That sounds very heavy, he said quietly. It is. She looked at the game board and moved her stone. The conversation shifted. They played the rest of the game in quiet, but it was a different quiet from before. Lighter somehow. The way a room feels after something trapped inside it has finally been let out. He lost the third game. He had known he would from about the middle of it. He didn't mind. Day 32 arrived with a bitter cold that made the cabin's walls creak. Rowan brought in extra wood, kept the fire high. They were working together on a section of floor near the cold room door that had been swelling from moisture and starting to gap. A task that required both of them. She held the plank steady while he worked the joint from the other side. Her hand was flat on the wood. Steadying, the firelight shifted behind them both and caught on something on her middle finger. A ring. He had noticed it before, of course, but had never looked closely. Had filed it alongside all the other things he was not asking about. But the light hit it just right, and he saw the seal clearly for the first time. Complex. Deliberate. The kind of craftsmanship that meant something beyond ornament. A clan seal. He didn't know the symbols, didn't know the language of orc heraldry, but he knew what authority looked like when it was carved into metal and worn on someone's hand. He drove the last peg home, sat back, let the silence run. Then he said, not looking at her, that ring. She went very still. He said, I'm not asking about it. I just want you to know I've seen it. Whatever it means, it's yours to tell me or not tell me. She looked at the ring, looked at him. The firelight made shadows of her face. He couldn't read her expression, but he could see her deciding something. When the time comes, she said slowly, I will tell you everything. All right. He got up to clean the sawdust from his hands. She sat by the floor for another moment before doing the same. Neither of them spoke about it again that night, but the knowledge sat between them now. Visible, acknowledged, waiting for its time. The 43rd day dawned cold and clear. Rowan had been out longer than usual. There were tracks near the east line he wanted to follow. Interesting prints, worth investigating. He came back to the cabin in the late afternoon light and found the door standing open. Not because she had left. He could see that immediately. He could see her inside standing very still in the center of the room. He could see the two people standing with her. Both orcs, both warriors, their bearing and equipment unmistakable. They wore gray and black, a clan livery he did not recognize. Both were larger than him, both armed, both looking at him with sharp assessment. Rowan stopped in the doorway. Thessa looked at him with an expression he had not seen before. Something complicated, something honest in the way very vulnerable expressions are honest when the person having them is not used to honesty. It was something like, I did not want this to happen yet. Something like, you were always going to find out. Something like, I am sorry for what comes next. She said his name, just his name, the way she said it now without the extra formality of the early days. Then she said, these are my people. Then she said, they have come to find me. The male warrior on the left spoke in Orcish, fast, clipped, clearly not meant for Rowan. Thessa answered in Orcish. The quality of that exchange, the way her posture shifted almost imperceptibly, the way both warriors' eyes moved between her and him, with visible reassessment, told Rowan that things were being negotiated in that moment, that he had no tools to follow. Then Thessa looked back at him and said in English, we need to speak. He stepped inside and closed the door. The warriors were Gareth and Price. Gareth was senior, scarred, 40 maybe, the kind of competence that came from surviving when others hadn't. Price was younger, barely 20, still had the look of someone trying to prove themselves in every movement. They had been tracking for 6 weeks, following Thessa's trail from the north through territory that had tried very hard to kill them. The expression on Gareth's face when he looked at Rowan was not hostile, but it was the expression of someone who had worked very hard for a very specific outcome and had arrived to find the situation more complicated than anticipated. Thessa told him the truth. She told it in pieces the way truth comes after a long time of partial truths. She told him about Ironmane clan, about the hold built into the Bitterroot High Country, about being Matriarch, about the ambush. She told him about Brenna. When she got to that part, her voice changed, went flatter, more controlled. The way people speak when they were describing something that still has the power to break them if they let it. They had been at Thunder Ridge Pass, 6 guards, elite warriors, her second-in-command Brenna at her side. They had been riding back from negotiations with a border clan, standard route, standard security. No reason to expect trouble. The ambush had come at the narrow point. 20 attackers. Professional, coordinated. Someone had known exactly where she would be and exactly when she would be there. Brenna had seen it first, had thrown herself between Thessa and the first blade, had bought Thessa the 30 seconds she needed to break the ambush formation and run. Brenna had not survived those 30 seconds. Thessa's voice went very quiet when she said that. Rowan watched her face, saw the weight of it, the specific guilt of a leader who had been saved at the cost of someone whose job was to save them. She told him about running, 4 days with 2 warriors, another ambush, down to 1 warrior. The warrior taking an arrow meant for her and telling her to go, to survive, because a matriarch alive in exile was better than a matriarch dead in the snow. She told him about 9 days alone, about stripping her armor and clan markings, about burying her sword, about trading her clan-marked cloak to a farmer's wife for directions and a bundle of rags, about keeping only 3 things: the tattoo she couldn't remove, the ring she turned inward so the seal pressed against her palm, and a small bone-handled knife at her hip. She told him about the man behind it. Draven, senior advisor, had served her mother, resented serving a daughter he considered too young, had spent months cultivating dissatisfaction among lesser chiefs, had arranged the ambush with precision. When she finished, the cabin was quiet. Rowan had been sitting on the floor, his forearms on his knees, looking at the fire, organizing what he felt. He didn't like to speak until he knew what he was actually saying. "So the mark on your arm," he said finally, "it is the matriarch's mark. Every Iron Mane matriarch receives it at investiture. It cannot be removed. And the ring, my mother's and her mother's before her." He was quiet again. Then he said very carefully, "You were never in any danger from me knowing. I know that now. Did you know it then?" "No, I did not trust anything then. I was in a state where trust was not something I had access to." He looked at her directly. She held the look. "I understand that," he said. Gareth, who had been watching this exchange with clear discomfort, said something in Orcish. Thessa's response was short and definitive. Gareth's posture shifted, not quite a bow, but acknowledgment. Rowan asked what she had said. Thessa said she had told him that Rowan was someone she trusted and that they would speak here as she chose. Rowan said, "I see." He got up and made tea, because it was what the situation called for. Because having something to do with his hands gave him room to be with what he was feeling, which was a complicated mixture, not anger. He had moved past any flicker of anger when he understood the circumstances. What he felt was more like vertigo, the sensation of ground being different from where he had placed his weight. He had been building something in this cabin over these weeks, building it carefully, building it without naming it, and he had built it on a foundation that was now revealed to be incomplete, not false, just incomplete. The woman by the fire was the same woman he had made porridge for, the same woman who had fixed his roof and played strategy games in the dark and learned the word for proper vegetable thickness. She was also the matriarch of a clan he had never heard of. Both things were true. Both things had to live in his understanding now. He poured tea, handed cups to all three, sat back down. He said, "Tell me about your clan." She looked at him. "You want to hear about my clan?" "I want to understand your life, the whole thing, if you are willing to tell it." She told him about the hold, about the Council of Chiefs, about the responsibility that had been hers since she was 4 years old, because that was when they started training matriarchs, about her mother's death 4 years ago, about the weight that had transferred to her shoulders before she was ready, about the loneliness of leadership even when surrounded by people, about learning to make decisions that affected hundreds of lives and living with the consequences alone. Gareth and Price stayed 2 nights, not more. Gareth had information to get back. The clan needed to know their matriarch was alive, that Draven's attempt had failed, that she would be returning. There were political movements to arrest, traitors to name, a clan to stabilize. Before they left, Gareth asked to speak with Rowan alone. They stood outside in the cold. Gareth looked at him for a moment before speaking. Then he said in careful English that Rowan had sheltered the matriarch when she would have died otherwise. That was a debt Iron Mane took seriously. Rowan would be compensated, whatever he wanted within their means. Rowan said he didn't want compensation. Gareth looked at him like he had said something in a language Gareth didn't speak. Rowan said, "I helped her because she needed help, not because of what she was, not because I expected payment." Gareth was quiet. Then he said very directly, "What do you want?" Rowan looked at the snow. "I'm still figuring that out." Gareth studied him. Then he said something Rowan did not expect. He said Thessa had not slept more than 3 consecutive hours a night in the 6 years he had known her. He said he had never heard her laugh until he arrived at this cabin and heard it through the wall on his second evening here. I do not know what you are to each other, Gareth said, but you should know what you have done. Rowan didn't know what to say to that. Gareth left the next morning with Price and a sealed letter from Thessa. He looked back at Rowan once before they disappeared into the trees. Not warm, but the suspicion had been mostly set aside. Then it was just the two of them again. The conversation they had that evening was the hardest one. She sat in her chair, he sat on his floor mat. The fire was lower than usual because neither had thought to add wood and neither moved to fix it now. In the dimming light, she told him what happened next. She had to go back. That was not a choice. She was matriarch of a clan that needed its matriarch. There were traitors to face, systems to restore, a future to secure for her people. She could not stay in a hunter's cabin at the edge of human territory, no matter what the cabin held. Rowan said he knew that. She said there were things she wanted to say to him. She had been trying to find the way to say them. He said then, say them. I came to your door believing that everyone wanted something from kindness, she said. That kindness was always a transaction. You showed me something different from that. I did not know how to receive it for a long time. The fire shifted. Shadows moved. I have spent my entire life being responsible for everyone else, having no one be responsible for me. Not in the small ways, not in the way of someone saying, let me look at your wound. Let me make your tea. Let me fix the thing you have been too tired to fix yourself. She was looking at the fire, not at him. I do not want to leave here, she said, and I know that I must. Those two things are both true. I cannot resolve them tonight. I know, he said. She turned to look at him then. The firelight made her face all shadow and light. She was not performing composure. He could see that. She was just sitting with what she felt. I want to ask you something, she said. I need you to hear it for what it is. Not an obligation, not a reward, not a political arrangement. One person asking another person a question. Ask. When I have done what I must do, when I have gone back and faced Draven and stabilized what needs to be stabilized, I want to come back here. I want to ask if you will come north with me. Not as anything formal, just to come, to see where I come from, to let me show you the light I told you about. The blue-green winter light. Yes. He was quiet for a long time. She waited. The fire burned lower. Outside, the wind tested the walls. I'll be here, he said. She looked at him with an expression he would remember. The look of someone who had just understood that something they thought was impossible was not. It might be months. I'll be here. Take care of what you need to take care of. Come back when you can. I finished the Guardian, she gestured to the shelf. It is there. He looked. He hadn't noticed when she had placed it. The small carved figure sat between his mother's wooden bird and the copper coin with the hole through it. Solid, watchful, exactly right. It's perfect, he said. She looked at her hands, at the fire, at him. You gave me back myself when I had lost everything. You had something to offer, he said. You just didn't know it yet. She left 3 days later. Before dawn, Gareth had sent riders that would let her travel faster than she had come. She was going back to Ironmane territory, going back to face what waited there. She wore traveling clothes that Gareth had brought. Not rags, his old heavy cloak that was too small for her shoulders, but which she wore anyway. Her bone-handled knife. The ring turned outward now, seal visible, as it would need to be. He walked with her to the tree line where the riders waited. The morning was dark and very cold. Their breath made clouds. At the edge of the trees, she stopped and turned to face him. She looked at him the way she had looked at things she was trying to memorize. Total attention, the focus of someone who did not know when they would see a thing again. I'm going to come back, she said. I know. There are words in my language for what you are to me. The closest is the one whose fire stays lit. It means the person whose presence makes a place into something more than a structure. She said the word in Orcish. He repeated it slowly. He got it right this time. She looked at him with that beginning of surprised laughter. Controlled it, but not completely. You practiced, she said. I had time. She reached out. The orc gesture. Palm upward, hand extended. An offering, not a grasping. He placed his hand in hers, palm down. The way she had shown him was right. Her hand was enormous around his and warm, despite the cold. She held it for a moment. Just a moment, then let go. She walked to the riders. He stood at the tree line and watched until he could not see her anymore. She was gone. The cabin was quiet in a way it had not been quiet before. Not the comfortable solitude he had built his life around. Just absence. The specific emptiness of a space that had contained someone and now did not. He went back inside. The stone guardian sat on the shelf. He looked at it for a long time. Then he added wood to the fire and began his day. The routine unchanged. The trap line pardon. The winter stretching ahead. 4 months, she had said, maybe more. He had 4 months to figure out what it meant that he had opened a door in a snowstorm and found something he had stopped believing he would ever find. He had 4 months to decide if he was brave enough to walk through a different door when she came back. One that led north into mountains he had never seen, into a life he could not predict, into a world where he would always be smaller and stranger and out of place. He was 31 years old. He had been alone for 7 years. He had built a life on the principle of not hoping for too much because hope had cost him everything he had loved. But hope, it turned out, was patient. It waited in unexpected places. It came through your door in a snowstorm and asked for nothing and gave you back something you thought you had lost. He looked at the stone guardian, at the wooden bird, at the copper coin, at the pressed herbs that smelled like his mother's garden, at the small shelf that had held his grief for 7 years and now held something else alongside it. He thought, she is coming back, and I will be here, and whatever comes next, we will face it together. Outside, the snow fell, the fire burned, the winter waited, and Rowan Fletcher, who had thought he had nothing to offer, began to understand that he had been wrong about that all along. Winter held the Bitterroot Mountains in its grip for 123 days after Thessa left. Rowan knew because he counted them. Not consciously at first, but somewhere around day 30, he realized he was marking time by her absence, the way sailors mark distance from shore. By what was missing rather than what remained. The cabin was too quiet. He had lived alone for 7 years. Had chosen this solitude deliberately, had built his life around the specific comfort of not having to account for anyone else's needs or presence or expectations. The quiet had been his preference, his sanctuary, the thing that let him heal or at least stop bleeding. Now it felt like absence. The chair by the fire had a vacancy to it. The stone guardian on the shelf watched him with patient eyes. He caught himself sometimes making enough food for 2 before remembering. Caught himself turning to say something to someone who wasn't there. He worked. The trap line still needed checking. The pelts still needed curing. The wood still needed splitting. Life continued in its relentless practical demands, regardless of whether you felt like participating. He went to Derby more than usual that winter. Into town on market days, sold his catches, bought supplies. Lingered longer than necessary in the general store or the feed shop, as if proximity to other humans could fill something that it could not fill. But trying felt less painful than the alternative. Mrs. Hadley, who ran the store, asked him once if he was feeling well. He looked different, she said. Thinner maybe, or just present, like he had finally surfaced after years underwater. He told her he was fine. She looked at him with the particular knowing of older women who have seen men lie about being fine too many times to believe it anymore. But she didn't push. Just told him to take care of himself and slipped an extra sack of cornmeal into his supplies without charging. He told no one about Thessa. He was not certain how to begin. Not certain it was his story to tell. It was their story. He would wait until they could tell it together. If they ever could. He fixed things around the cabin. Properly this time. The roof patch that she had weighted with the perfect stone, he reinforced with tar and new shingles. The floor she had helped him repair, he sanded smooth and sealed. The hinges she had oiled, he replaced entirely. He was building something. He understood that. Building a space that could hold 2 people instead of 1. Making room for a future he couldn't quite see but was choosing to believe in anyway. He extended the herb garden, or rather he prepared the ground for extending it come spring. Cleared more space on the south side, marked out where the beds would go. His mother's knowledge lived in his hands. Thessa had said her people valued those who kept the old names. Well, he kept the old knowledge. That would have to be enough. He carved a wooden hawk, small, rough, nothing as accomplished as her stone guardian, but he made it anyway and set it on the shelf next to the guardian. He did not know why, just that it felt necessary, his answer to her offering. At night when the wind howled and the temperature dropped to 20 below and the darkness pressed against the windows, he thought about the blue-green light, about mountains he had never seen, about a life that existed in a world that was not going to make any of this easy. He was afraid. This was honest. He let himself feel it fully rather than pushing it down. He was afraid of being inadequate, of arriving in her world and being small in every way that mattered, of not knowing the customs or the language or the right way to carry himself in spaces built for people whose proportions were not his. He was afraid of being a liability to her, a political difficulty, something her enemies would use and her allies would have to forgive her for. He was afraid the connection that had grown in the contained quiet of a winter cabin would not survive contact with the larger world. But he was also afraid with a different and more clarifying kind of fear of what it would mean to let her come back and then say no. He had been choosing the small, safe life for 7 years, choosing it in the name of grief and preference, and the particular kind of peace that is really just the absence of risk. And for a time, those had been good reasons. Good enough, but they had stopped being sufficient sometime in the middle of a winter with an orc woman who had fixed his roof and carved a guardian for his shelf and said a word for him in a language he didn't speak. That meant the one whose fire stays lit. He was still thinking about all of this on the morning she came back. Spring came to Montana the way it always did, grudgingly, with false starts and bitter reversals. Snow in April, freeze in May. Then one morning the world woke up green and you realized winter had finally let go. It was that kind of morning, clear and bright and full of the specific promise that only comes after months of cold. Rowan was at the woodpile, splitting logs that had seasoned over winter. The rhythm of it was meditative. Swing, split, stack, swing, split, stack. The mindless repetition that let thoughts settle. He heard the horses first, not one or two, more. The sound of multiple animals moving through forest, coming fast but controlled. He set down the axe and walked around the cabin to the front clearing. She was there, standing at the tree line with 6 riders behind her, all of them in the gray and black livery of Ironmane clan, all of them armed and armored, all of them looking like exactly what they were, warriors who had traveled hard to be here. But Rowan only saw her. She was not in rags this time. She wore traveling clothes that were clearly fine even at this distance. Dark leather over lighter fabric. Practical but well made. Expensive. The clothing of someone with resources and status. Her hair was braided back in an elaborate pattern he had not seen before. Complex, formal. The kind of thing that took time and help to accomplish. The ring on her finger faced outward. Seal visible. Catching the morning light. She looked like what she was. What she had always been. Matriarch, leader, someone who commanded and was obeyed, someone who carried the weight of hundreds of lives and wore that weight like armor. She was also looking at him the way she had in the dark of the cabin when she thought he wasn't watching, the way she had looked at him the morning she left, like he was something valuable and fragile, and she was trying to memorize every detail in case she never saw it again. He walked toward her. She walked toward him. They met in the middle of the clearing in the bright spring morning with the riders behind her and the cabin behind him and the forest on all sides. They looked at each other. Neither spoke immediately. There was too much to say. Too much that had happened in the 4 months apart. Too much that words would only diminish. Finally, she said, "I said I would come back." "You did. I have done what I needed to do." Her voice was steady, formal, the voice of someone making an official report. Draven has been stripped of his position. His co-conspirators have been identified and dealt with according to our law. My clan is stable. My position is secure. I'm glad. I have also spoken to my council and to my senior chiefs. I have told them about you, what you did, who you are, what I intend to ask you. He waited. She took a breath. Something shifted in her posture. Less formal, more vulnerable. More the person he had known in the quiet of winter, rather than the matriarch making proclamations. 2 of my 3 senior chiefs support this, she said. The third is unconvinced, but will not oppose me. My council has concerns. That is their function. I have addressed those concerns. Gareth has said he will reserve judgment until he has observed you in a more demanding context than a cabin. That sounds fair? She almost smiled, caught it, let a fraction of it show anyway. I'm going to ask you something, Rowan. I'm going to ask it the way my people ask things, directly, without ceremony, because we believe the weight of a question should come from what it means, not how it is wrapped. All right, she straightened, met his eyes fully. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute sincerity. No performance, no politics, just truth. I am asking you to come north with me to Iron Main Hold, not as a guest, not as a political arrangement, not as a reward for service rendered. I am asking you to come as the person I want beside me. The morning was very quiet. Even the birds seemed to be listening. You will have your own space, she continued, your own role, built on what you actually are not, on what title can be invented for it. You will not be required to be other than you are, but you will face difficulty. There are people in my clan and in the surrounding territories who will not easily accept this. I will not pretend otherwise. She paused. The formality was slipping. He could see the woman underneath, the one who had sat by his fire and carved a guardian and learned to laugh. I want to build something with you, she said quietly. I do not know yet what it will look like. I know that I want to try now. Another pause, then even quieter. I know what it cost you to be here alone. I know you made yourself comfortable with small things because the larger things had all gone badly. I am not asking you to abandon comfort. I am asking you to exchange one kind of life for another. I cannot promise the exchange is good. What I can promise is that I will not disappear on you. I will not treat you as lesser. I will not ask you to be anything other than what you are. The sun was warm on his face. The spring air smelled of pine and thaw and new growth. Behind her, the 6 riders waited with patient discipline. In front of him, Thessa waited with something that looked very much like hope and very much like fear in equal measure. I have one condition, he said. She waited. I'm bringing the shelf things. She looked at him. That sound moved across her face. The unguarded one. The laugh she was learning to allow. The bird, he said. The coin, the guardian, the pressed herbs. They go where I go. Obviously, she said. Then yes. She looked at him for a long moment. Her face did something complex. Not quite tears, but the precursor to tears. The overwhelm of getting something you had not quite let yourself hope for. She mastered it, barely, but he saw it first. You should know, she said. In my clan, when you say yes to something like this, it is binding. We do not treat it as provisional. Good, he said. I wasn't planning to. They gave him 2 hours to pack. He took one. There was not much to bring. Clothes, tools, his mother's herb knowledge written in the careful notebook she had kept. The things from the shelf wrapped carefully in cloth. To someday, or might not. Either way you to someday, or might not. Either way you leave it with respect. Gareth had brought an extra horse, a smaller one. Not a war mount like the others, rode but still larger than anything Rowan had ever sat on. The animal looked at him with intelligent eyes and seemed to accept that this was happening, whether either of them were enthusiastic about it. They rode north, into the high country, up through passes Rowan had never taken, through forests that grew denser and then opened into high valleys, and then climbed again into true mountains. The Bitterroot Range in its full complexity, beautiful and harsh and unforgiving. The riders moved with military precision. This was not a pleasure trip. This was a matriarch returning to her territory with an escort appropriate to her station. They rode hard but not recklessly, stopped to rest the horses and eat cold rations, and then moved again. Gareth rode near Rowan, not hovering, just present, observing. At one point when they stopped to water the horses at a mountain stream, Gareth asked if Rowan knew this country. Some of it, Rowan said. Not this far north. You move well in wild places. It was an observation, not a compliment. Assessment, not approval. Rowan just nodded. That night they made camp in a high valley. The riders set up with efficient practice. Rowan helped where he could, set snares near the camp perimeter, gathered kindling, made himself useful without being asked. The young rider Price watched him with open curiosity. The others watched with more subtle evaluation. Thessa called him over to the fire after they had eaten, sat next to him, not too close, respecting the presence of her people, but close enough that the message was clear. This human is under my protection. He is here by my choice. One of the other riders said something in Orcish. It had the cadence of a question. Thessa answered, then translated for Rowan. She asked if you have family in Derby. I told her no. That's true. I told her you are coming to see if Ironmane can become your family. He looked at her. She looked back. In the firelight, her face was all shadows and highlights. Strong features, tired eyes, the weight of 4 months away from him visible in the tightness around her mouth. Is that what I'm coming to do? He asked quietly. I hope so, she said. They held the look for a moment longer. Then she stood and moved to speak with Gareth about the next day's route. But her hand had brushed his shoulder as she rose. Briefly. A touch that said, I am glad you are here. I was not certain you would come. I am glad. He sat by the fire and looked up at the stars and thought about family. About what that meant. About whether you could choose family at 31, or if family was only the thing you were born into and spent the rest of your life trying to escape or honor or understand. The mountains were vast around them. The darkness, absolute. The stars too many to count. He was 3 days' ride from the only home he had known and heading toward something he could not predict. He should have been terrified. He was. But underneath the terror was something else. Something that felt almost like excitement, almost like hope. The feeling of a door opening instead of closing. The feeling of a life expanding instead of contracting. He slept that night wrapped in blankets that smelled of horse and smoke and mountain air. He slept better than he had in 4 months. They reached Ironmane territory on the afternoon of the 3rd day. Rowan knew they had crossed some invisible boundary by the way the riders relaxed fractionally, by the way Thessa sat straighter in her saddle, by the watchtowers that appeared on high points, stone structures built to last centuries, guards visible on the ramparts. The guards saw them coming, raised hands in salute, called down in Orcish. Thessa called back. Rowan caught his name in the exchange, saw the guard's attention shift to him, saw the calculation, the question, the doubt. They descended into a valley that should not have been there, a hidden place, high country that flattened into a protected basin maybe 2 miles across. Good grazing, forested edges, a river running through it, defensible, rich, the kind of place people would fight over if they knew it existed. And at the far end, built into the mountain face itself, was Ironmane Hold. Rowan had to work to keep his expression neutral. The structure was massive, stone walls that seemed to grow out of the mountain, towers and ramparts and carved facades that spoke to generations of work. The architecture was Orc, proportions scaled to their size, openings large enough for warriors in full armor, but also beautiful in a severe way, functional beauty, the beauty of something built to last and built right. People began to appear as they rode through the valley, workers in the fields, hunters returning with game, warriors on patrol, all of them stopping to watch the Matriarch return, all of them seeing Rowan on his smaller horse and doing the math. One human, riding with their Matriarch. This was going to be a story. He could see it rippling through the crowd, the looks, the whispers, the sheer curiosity. They passed through gates that could have held back an army, into a courtyard that could have held 200 people and probably had. Thessa dismounted with fluid grace. Rowan got down more carefully. His legs were not used to 3 days on horseback. The crowd was growing. Word had spread. The Matriarch had returned, and she had brought something. Someone. The human from the south that the rumors had mentioned. An older orc approached. Massive even by orc standards, gray in his hair and beard, scars across his face and arms. The kind of scars you earned over decades of not dying when you should have. He wore gray and black with additional markings that suggested high rank. He stopped in front of Thessa, placed his right fist over his heart, bowed his head slightly. Matriarch, you are returned. I am returned, Aldrich. Her voice carried, formal, the public voice. And I am whole. My enemies are scattered. Ironmane stands strong. So we have heard and celebrated. Aldrich's gaze slid to Rowan. Assessed, calculated, dismissed. All in about 3 seconds. Then back to Thessa. Your chambers are prepared. Your counsel awaits your convenience. I will meet them after I have settled my guest. That word, guest, it hung in the air with particular weight. Aldrich's eyes narrowed fractionally. Guest implied temporary. Guest implied not clan, but the way she said it implied something else entirely. Rowan stood very still. Let the assessment happen. Let them look. He had expected this, had known it would be hard, was prepared to let it be hard without reacting. A young orc pushed through the crowd, female, maybe 17, hair in a single braid, eyes bright with barely contained excitement. She stopped in front of them and made a credible attempt at a formal bow. Matriarch, I am Marin, daughter of Kelda. I have been assigned to assist your guest with anything required. Thessa's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Thank you, Marin. This is Rowan Fletcher. He will need a guide, someone to teach him our ways, someone patient. Marin straightened. I am very patient, Matriarch. That remains to be seen. Rowan Marin will show you to your quarters. I will find you after the council meeting. It was dismissal, public and clear. He understood it. She had political theater to perform. A matriarch returning to her hold could not immediately vanish into private chambers with the strange human. That would raise questions better left unraised until the ground was prepared. He inclined his head to her, the slight bow he had practiced, not too deep, not too shallow, respect without subservience. Then he turned to Marin. Lead on. The girl grinned, clearly delighted to have this assignment. She led him into the hold, talking the entire time in rapid English, with a thick accent that he had to work to follow. Something about water times and meal times, in the East Wing and the West Wing, and 7 generations of matriarchs. And did he really kill a wolf with his bare hands? Because Price said he did, but Price exaggerated everything. I didn't kill a wolf, Rowan said. Oh. Marin sounded disappointed. What did you do? I watched Thessa talk to it. It left. Marin's eyes went wide. She stopped walking. The matriarch spoke to a wolf and it obeyed. Something like that. She processed this, then grinned wider. That is much better than killing it. She led him through corridors carved from stone, lit by torches and in some places by what looked like natural light channels cut through the mountain. Clever engineering, the work of generations. Everything was scaled wrong for him. Doorways too tall, ceilings too high, stairs with treads too deep. He felt like a child in an adult world. His room was in what Marin called the guest wing, though she said guest with a particular emphasis that suggested it might mean something else soon. The room was large by his standards, massive by any reasonable measure. A bed big enough for 3 of him, a table, chairs, a window that looked out over the valley approach. Marin showed him everything with enthusiasm, where the bathing room was, how the water heating worked, when meals were served in the great hall, where he could find her if he needed anything. She talked until another orc appeared in the doorway, older female, stern expression. Marin, the matriarch requires you. Yes, mother. Marin turned to Rowan. I will come back tomorrow to start teaching you our language, our customs, everything. I appreciate that. She left with her mother. The door closed. Rowan was alone in a stone room in a mountain hold, in a valley he had not known existed 3 days ago. He went to the window and looked out at the valley, at the hold below, at the people moving with purpose through their day. He was the only human here, the only one his size, the only one who did not belong. That was going to be the reality. He needed to accept it now, lean into it, find a way to be useful despite it, or because of it. He unpacked his thing, set up the shelf items on the table because there was no shelf. The bird, the coin, the guardian, the herbs, they looked small in this large space, inadequate, but they were his. They were what he had brought. They would have to be enough. That night he ate in the great hall, alone at one end of a long table. The hall held maybe 200 orcs, all of them eating and talking and living their lives, all of them aware of him, some staring openly, some stealing glances, some ignoring him with a particular intensity that meant they were very aware and choosing not to show it. He ate. kept his eyes on his food, did not engage, just existed. Let them get used to him being there. Tomorrow would be harder. The first real test came on the 8th day. Rowan had spent a week learning. Marin was relentless and enthusiastic and actually very good at teaching. She taught him basic Orcish phrases, courtesies, how to greet properly, how to show respect. The difference between formal and informal address, the hierarchy of the hold and who deferred to whom. She also taught him by taking him everywhere, to the training yards where warriors practiced, to the forge where weapons were made, to the council hall where decisions were rendered, to the kitchens where food was prepared at scale. She talked constantly, translated everything, made him repeat words until his pronunciation was acceptable, corrected him without mercy. He learned. He was good at learning by observation, had spent his life watching and adapting. This was just another skill to acquire. But he was also aware of being watched, constantly. The warriors assessed him as a potential threat or weakness. The craftspeople assessed him with curiosity. The elders assessed him with suspicion. And everyone wondered what the matriarch was thinking bringing a human here. The test came on a morning when Thessa was in council. A messenger arrived from one of the border clans. Rowan was in the main hall with Marin working on vocabulary when the messenger entered. He was large even for an orc. Scarred, brain, moving with aggressive confidence. The kind of confidence that was half genuine and half performance. He announced himself to the guards in a voice meant to carry, demanded immediate audience with the matriarch regarding a trade dispute. The guards explained the matriarch was in council, would see him when available. The messenger's eyes swept the hall and landed on Rowan. He said something in Orcish, fast, contemptuous. Rowan didn't catch all of it, but he caught enough. Something about humans and weakness, and this is what the mighty Iron Mane has become. Marin went very still beside him, her face flushed. She started to stand. Rowan touched her arm, gentle, restraining. Then he stood himself. He walked across the hall to the messenger, slowly, not aggressive, just purposeful. He stopped at a respectful distance, met the messenger's eyes. The orc was a full head taller, maybe more. Rowan had to look up. He said in careful Orcish, "The matriarch is in council. She will see you when she is available. While you wait, may I offer tea?" The messenger stared at him. The hall had gone quiet. People were watching. Rowan held the look. Calm, steady, the particular stillness he had learned from waiting in the forest for game. The stillness that was not threat or submission, but simply presence. The messenger's expression shifted. Calculation replaced contempt. This human spoke Orcish. This human was offering hospitality. This human was not intimidated. "Tea," the messenger said slowly. "Yes, I will take tea." Rowan went to the kitchen. The cook stared at him. He explained in broken Orcish and worse hand gestures that he needed to prepare tea for a guest. One of the older cooks, after a moment of stunned silence, showed him where things were. He made the tea the way he had learned from his mother, strong, properly steeped. Served hot, he brought it back to the messenger, set it down without ceremony, then returned to his seat with Marin. They sat in silence. The messenger drank his tea. When Thessa emerged from council an hour later and found the hall quiet and the border clan messenger sitting peacefully with an empty cup, she stopped, looked at the scene, looked at Rowan. One eyebrow raised fractionally. The meeting went well. The messenger left the next morning with a provisional agreement and a container of tea that the kitchen had pressed on him when they understood what had happened. That afternoon, Aldrich came to find Rowan, the senior chief, the one who had been unconvinced. He sat down across from Rowan in the small study area that Rowan had started using, looked at him for a long moment with eyes that had seen everything and were impressed by very little. "You understand," Aldrich said, "you will never be entirely comfortable here. I know. There will always be those who see you and see only difference, only weakness, only an outsider who does not belong. I know that too. What do you have that makes the difficulty worth it?" Rowan thought about it. He said honestly, "I have her, and I have the sense that what we're building matters, not just to us, to something larger." Aldrich looked at him for a very long time. Then he said, "The matriarch has not been easy to serve. She carries too much alone, always. Her mother was the same. Her mother never allowed herself an ally she fully trusted. Not truly. I think maybe our matriarch has finally found one. He stood. He did not say anything further, but he inclined his head in the slight, deliberate way that Marin had taught Rowan was the gesture of respect between equals among senior members of the clan. Then he left. Rowan sat in the study and thought, I just passed something important. I am not sure what, but it was important. The second challenge came from within. Garrick was 35, ambitious, capable, the son of one of Thessa's senior chiefs and someone who had, according to Marin's whispered intelligence, considered himself a reasonable candidate for a permanent position in the matriarch's inner circle. Not a suitor exactly. Orcs didn't really do courtship the way humans did, but someone whose proximity to power was ambition and whose presence near the matriarch had political meaning. Rowan's arrival had complicated that ambition considerably. Garrick never said anything directly, was always correct, always formal. But he looked at Rowan the way you look at a problem that needs solving. And eventually he proposed a solution. It came in the form of a challenge. Not combat, that would have been stupid and insulting, but a traditional test. A problem-solving contest. The kind that could be proposed between any two people regardless of size or skill. A test of mind and resourcefulness rather than strength. The problem was real, had been sitting unsolved for months. The eastern water channel that fed the hold's lower kitchens had a section that froze every winter morning. Ice had to be broken manually, daily, by workers who were getting injured at an increasing rate, hands and fingers damaged from the cold and the repetitive trauma. It was a genuine issue affecting real people. Garrick proposed his solution to the assembled chiefs and interested parties. It involved rotating work crews, better tools for breaking ice, scheduled breaks, more workers. It was logical, methodical, the solution of someone who saw problems through the lens of applying more force and accepting the cost. Then Rowan was invited to propose an alternative. He spent 2 days looking at the channel, followed it from source to kitchen, traced the problem section, studied the angle of sunlight, the prevailing wind, the way water moved. Marin trailed behind him, asking questions he answered when he could, while he thought. On the third day he presented to the council. Thessa was there. Aldrich, the other chiefs, Garrick with his arms crossed, Marin sitting in the back row, vibrating with anticipation. Rowan's solution was simple. Reroute 6 feet of the channel, line that section with flat rocks from the east slope where Marin had shown him they could be quarried. Install a wooden cover system that would insulate the water from the coldest air without blocking flow. Cost 1 week of initial labor. Maintenance minimal. The problem would not recur. It was not complicated, not impressive to look at, just correct. It would work. And it would make the lives of the workers easier. That was what mattered. Garrick said with precise courtesy, it is a simple solution. Rowan said the best solutions usually are. Aldrich looked at the proposed plan, then at Rowan, then at Garrick. Then he said simply, do it. Garrick left with his dignity intact and his opposition substantially reduced. He was not a friend, would likely never be one. But over the following weeks, he shifted from watching Rowan with calculation to watching him with something that was at its best moments grudging respect. Rowan treated him with consistent straightforwardness, neither seeking approval nor rejecting the possibility of it. This turned out to be the right approach. The Iron Mane respected people who did not need to be liked but were willing to be fair. He was building something, slowly, incrementally, a place for himself in this world that had not been designed to hold him. Then the danger returned. It was small at first, easy to miss if you were not watching. Ravens circling the valley, more than usual, the kind of accumulation that felt meaningful to people who paid attention to signs. Scouts reported tracks, outside the valley proper but close, patterns that suggested surveillance rather than passage. Someone was watching, evaluating, waiting. The council met. Rowan was not invited. That was appropriate. This was clan business, military business. He was what guest advisor, something unnamed. Either way, not someone who belonged in war councils. But he heard about it after from Marin, heard that Draven's loyalists were still active, heard that there might be another attempt, heard that the matriarch had ordered increased patrols and heightened vigilance. That night, Thessa came to his quarters. Late, after the hold had mostly settled. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from carrying weight that never got lighter. "They are coming," she said without preamble. "I heard. I want you inside, protected, until we have dealt with them." He looked at her. "No." She blinked. "No. I didn't come here to hide when things get dangerous. I came here to stand with you. That means standing when it's hard. You are not a warrior." "No, but I know traps. I know tracking. I know how to move in wild places and see what others miss. Let me help." She was quiet, calculating. The matriarch evaluating options. Then the person underneath surfaced. The woman who had sat by his fire, who had trusted him enough to be vulnerable. "If something happens to you, then something happens. But I will not hide while your people face danger. I will not be that person." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Once. Acceptance. The next day he worked with Gareth and a team of scouts. Set perimeter alarms using hunter knowledge. Tripwires, noisemakers, small fires positioned to create smoke signals. Herbs that burned with particular smells that would carry on wind. The practical skills of a man who had lived alone in wild country and needed to know when things approached his space. The warriors watched him work. Some skeptical, some curious. But by the end of the day, they were following his suggestions, were asking questions, were treating him as someone who knew things they did not. That night, the alarm stayed quiet, and the night after. But on the third night, just after midnight, the bells rang. 3 assassins had breached the perimeter. Professional, quiet, moving with purpose toward the matriarch's chambers. They had gotten past the outer patrols, past the first warning systems, but not past the tripwires Rowan had set. He heard the bells from his room, was up and moving before conscious thought, out into the corridor. No weapon. He had his knives, but this was not the forest. This was the hold. He was a guest here, not authorized to bear weapons inside. He ran toward the matriarch's wing, turned a corner, came face to face with an orc in dark clothes, no clan markings, a blade in his hand catching torchlight. The assassin's eyes widened fractionally, not expecting to find anyone here, not expecting a human. The moment of surprise was all Rowan needed. He threw the small pouch of herb powder he had been carrying, his mother's recipe, ground pepper and capsaicin and other plants that burned eyes and nose and throat. The assassin inhaled it, stumbled. The knife came up wild. Rowan kicked the tripwire he had set across this corridor, just a simple wire at ankle height. The kind that worked because people did not look down when they were already compromised. The assassin went down hard. Rowan grabbed the emergency bell at the quarter junction, pulled it. The sound echoed through the hold, loud, urgent, unmistakable. He heard running, multiple directions, guards responding, but also heard fighting from further down the corridor. Toward Thessa's chambers, the other assassins, already engaged. He ran that direction, turned the final corner, saw Thessa in the corridor, 2 attackers. She was fighting, not with weapons, with everything, brutal, efficient, the trained violence of someone who had been learning war since childhood. Gareth appeared from the other direction, guards behind him. They crashed into the fight like a wave breaking. The assassins went down, captured, subdued. Thessa stood in the corridor breathing hard, blood on her knuckles, not hers. She looked at Rowan. "Are you hurt?" "No, are you?" "No." She looked past him to where the third assassin was being dragged to his feet by 2 guards, looked at the powder residue on the corridor floor. The tripwire. Looked back at Rowan. "You stopped him. Your alarm system worked. I just helped." Gareth appeared beside them, looked at Rowan, then at Thessa, then said, "The human has a practical mind for defense." It was not effusive praise, but coming from Gareth, it was acceptance, recognition, the acknowledgement that Rowan had proven something tonight. The assassins were taken away, interrogated, confessed within hours that Draven's remaining loyalists had sent them, that there was a network still active, that they needed to be rooted out completely. But that would come tomorrow. Tonight in the aftermath, Thessa came back to Rowan's quarters, sat on the too large chair, looked at him. "Thank you," she said. "You would have handled it without me." Perhaps, but I did not have to. That matters. They sat in silence. The mountain held them. The night moved outside. Inside, two people who had found each other in a snowstorm sat together and understood that they had just crossed another threshold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, would bring the final confrontation with Draven's network, would bring the resolution that had been building since she ran from that ambush months ago. But tonight they were safe, they were together. They had stood side by side when danger came. That was enough. Morning came to Ironmane Hold with the particular quality of light that follows violence. Sharp, clear, unforgiving. The kind of light that makes you see everything exactly as it is without the softening mercy of shadow. Rowan stood at his window and looked down at the valley. Smoke rose from the Hold's many hearths. People moved through their morning routines. Life continuing because life always continued. The world did not stop turning because three men had tried to kill their matriarch in the night. But something had changed. He could feel it in the way guards nodded to him when he passed, in the way conversations paused when he entered a room not with hostility but with acknowledgment, in the way Marin had appeared at his door at dawn and said simply, "The matriarch requests your presence in the Great Hall." Formal dress. He did not have formal dress. He had what he had brought. Clean shirt, his better coat. He made himself as presentable as possible and followed Marin through corridors that seemed different this morning. Less alien, more like passages he was learning to navigate rather than mazes he was lost in. The Great Hall was full, not the casual fullness of a meal, the deliberate assembly of a clan gathering. 200 orcs standing in organized groups, warriors in their sections, crafters in theirs, elders, young ones, everyone. Thessa stood at the head of the hall on a raised platform, still in her fighting clothes from the night before. Deliberate, she was making a point. Their matriarch had fought in the night. Their matriarch had bled. Their matriarch stood before them. Now unbroken, Gareth stood to her left, Aldrich to her right. The positioning was symbolic, military and council, strength and wisdom. She saw Rowan enter, gestured for him to come forward. The crowd parted. He walked through silence that had weight, stopped at the base of the platform. She looked down at him. Her face was formal, the public mask, but her eyes held something else. Gratitude, recognition, the private acknowledgment beneath the public performance. She spoke in Orcish first. Her voice carried to every corner of the hall. Rowan understood some of it from his weeks of lessons. Something about the attack, about vigilance, about enemies who struck from shadows, about the response. Then she switched to English, for his benefit, for the clarity of what came next. Last night, 3 assassins entered our hold. They came for me. They came to destabilize Ironmane. They came believing they would find us vulnerable. She paused. Let that settle. They were wrong. Our defenses held. Our warriors responded. The threat was neutralized. But I want to acknowledge specifically the one who gave us the tools to see what was coming, who designed the alarm systems that gave us warning, who stood in a corridor unarmed and stopped an armed assassin through wit and courage rather than strength. She looked directly at Rowan. Rowan Fletcher, step forward. He climbed the steps. Stood beside her, the height difference was absurd. She was a full head taller, maybe more. He looked small next to her, small next to everyone on this platform, small in this hall full of warriors and chiefs and people who belonged here in ways he never would. But he stood straight, met her eyes, waited. You saved my life last night, she said. Formal, public. You saved lives of my people. You did this not because you are sworn to Ironmane, not because you are bound by duty or law. You did this because when danger came, you stood with us. You did not hide. You did not flee. You stood. The hall was silent, listening, judging, deciding. I name you, she said, and her voice shifted, became something between formal proclamation and personal truth. I name you Ironmane's Ranger, defender of the hold, keeper of the wild knowledge, teacher of those skills we have forgotten in our mountainstone. You will train our scouts. You will maintain our defenses. You will walk between our world and the world beyond and bring us the wisdom of both. She paused, then added softer, if you will accept. He had not expected this, had not expected a role, a title, a place that was defined in his. He looked at her, at Gareth, who nodded once with something like approval, at Aldrich, whose scarred face showed nothing but whose eyes held assessment. "I accept," Rowan said. The hall erupted, not cheering exactly. Orcs did not cheer, but they struck weapons against stone, against armor, against shields. A rhythmic, percussive sound that filled the space and said, "We acknowledge this. We accept this. You are seen." Garrick stood in the crowd, arms still crossed, but he was striking his knife hilt against his belt with the others. That counted for something. When the sound faded, Aldrich stepped forward. The senior chief, the one who had been unconvinced. He looked at Rowan for a long moment. Then he spoke in English, slow and deliberate, so everyone would understand. Her mother never allowed herself an ally she fully trusted. Not truly. She carried everything alone, and it made her strong, but also alone. Dangerous to be that alone. Our matriarch has chosen different. She has chosen to share the weight. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. He placed his fist over his heart, the formal gesture. You stand with the matriarch. You stand with Ironmane. We stand with you. It was acceptance. Complete. Public. Binding. Rowan inclined his head, the bow of respect, not submission, just recognition of what had been given. The assembly broke. People returned to their work, but they looked at him differently now. He was not just the strange human. He was the ranger. He had a role, a purpose, a reason to be here that went beyond the matriarch's personal choice. Later, in a small meeting room, Thessa explained what came next. Aldrich was leading a small party to track down the remaining loyalist cells. Gareth would go, elite trackers. It would take weeks, maybe months, but they would find everyone connected to Draven's network, root them out completely, end this threat permanently. "I want you to go with them," Thessa said. Rowan looked up surprised. "Why?" "Because they need your skills. Because Aldrich requested you specifically. Because you have earned the right to see this through. And you, I will be here. Rebuilding, strengthening. There is political work that cannot wait. But this is warrior work. Tracking work. Your work." She was right. He knew she was right. But the idea of leaving her again, so soon after finding her, after nearly losing her. "I will be safe," she said, reading his face. "Garrick will command the home guard. Half our warriors remain. The hold is secure, and you will return." "How long?" 2 months, maybe 3. "That's a long time." "Yes," she moved closer. In this private space, she allowed herself to be less formal, less matriarch, and more the person he had known in the cabin. "But you are Ironmane's ranger now. Rangers go where they are needed, even when it is difficult." He understood. This was part of what he had agreed to, part of building a life here. He could not just be her companion. He had to have his own role, his own contribution, his own reason to be respected. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow at dawn." The tracking party was 6 strong. Aldrich commanded. Gareth second. 3 other warriors, whose names Rowan learned on the trail, Cara Drin and young Price, who had been with Gareth when they found Thessa at the cabin months ago. And Rowan. They moved fast, traveled light. Aldrich set a pace that was punishing, but sustainable. They were hunting and time mattered. The Loyalists would scatter if they knew Ironmane was coming. 3 days out from Ironmane Hold, they found a cold campsite, signs of multiple people, but the signs were strange, confused. Aldrich studied them and frowned. Rowan knelt, looked at the tracks, the way the fire pit had been built, the pattern of disturbance. He stood and walked a careful circle, found what he was looking for. They split here, half went north, half east. They're trying to confuse the trail. Aldrich looked at him. "You can tell that from tracks. I can tell that from how badly they tried to hide it. People who know what they're doing don't leave this much evidence. People who are worried about being followed make mistakes." They split up. Aldrich took the north trail with Dren and Price. They would meet at a designated point in 5 days. Gareth took east with Cara and Rowan. They tracked for 3 more days through increasingly rough country. Rowan read sign that the warriors missed. Broken branches at specific heights. Disturbed moss, the particular way Earth looked when someone had passed recently versus hours ago versus days. On the sixth day since leaving Iron Main, they found the Loyalist camp. 5 orcs, heavily armed, positioned in a defensible ravine. Gareth assessed and made a decision. They would not attack. They would observe and follow when the group moved, learn where they were going, who they were meeting. They shadowed the Loyalists for 2 more days. Rowan moved like a ghost, his hunter skills translating perfectly to this work. The warriors watched him with growing respect. This small human could move through forest more quietly than any of them. The Loyalists led them to a larger gathering, maybe 20 total, a real camp, organized, supplied. This was the core of the resistance, the true believers who would keep fighting. Gareth sent Kara back to find Aldrich. Bring him here. They would need the full party for this, maybe reinforcements. Rowan and Gareth settled into watch. 3 days later, Aldrich arrived with his half of the party and 10 additional warriors he had sent for. 27 Iron Main warriors against 20 Loyalists. The math was sufficient. The confrontation was brief and brutal. Aldrich offered terms: surrender, trial, jail for those who had not killed, death for those who had. The Loyalists refused, chose to fight. It was over in minutes. Iron Main warriors were simply better. Better trained, better equipped, better led. The Loyalists were zealots, but zealotry without skill is just noise. When the fighting ended, Aldrich stood over the Loyalist leader, a male named Krall who had served under Draven and believed in his vision of Iron Main's future. You could have chosen exile, chosen life. Life without honor is not life, Krall said. Then die with whatever honor you think you have preserved. Aldrich was not cruel. The end was quick, for all of them. Orc law was harsh, but it was not sadistic. They burned the bodies according to tradition, said the words for the dead, even though they had been enemies. Because the dead deserved that much. Because someday it would be them and they hoped someone would say the words. That night, sitting around their own fire, Aldrich spoke to Rowan. You did well on this hunt. You have skills we lack. Skills we need. I'm glad I could help. The Matriarch chose well when she brought you to us. I did not think so at first. I thought she was letting her heart guide her judgment. I was wrong. I don't think you were entirely wrong. Her heart did guide her, but her judgment was also sound. Both things can be true. Aldrich smiled. It was a rare expression on his scarred face. You are learning to think like us. That is good. You will need that. They returned to Iron Main Hold 6 weeks after leaving. The summer was at its height, the valley green and full. Thessa met them at the gate, formal at first, the matriarch greeting her returning warriors. But when Rowan dismounted, she crossed to him quickly, checked him with her eyes. You are whole. I'm whole. Good. That night in private, she told him everything that had happened in his absence. The political consolidation, the new agreements with border clans, the establishment of regular councils that included representatives from 3 neighboring territories. She was building something, not just maintaining Iron Main, expanding it, creating a network of alliances that would make her clan stronger and safer than it had ever been. You are building peace, he said. I am building what my mother could not. She won battles. I want to win the peace. That is harder. That lasts longer. The seasons turned. Summer became autumn. The valley transformed. Rowan settled into his role as ranger. He trained scouts, taught tracking, established patrol patterns, created defensive systems, worked with young warriors who were eager to learn, and with veterans who were skeptical but respectful. Marin became his official apprentice. She learned everything he taught with fierce concentration. Within months, she was better than most of the scouts. She had the mind for it, the attention to detail, the patience. Garrett came to him once, not for challenge this time, for genuine consultation. There was a problem with game management in the eastern hunting grounds. Too many young hunters taking too much too fast. Garrick wanted advice on sustainable practice. They worked it out together. Established quotas, rotation zones, the kind of long-term thinking that protected resources rather than exhausting them. After that, Garrick was not a friend, but he was an ally. That was enough. Autumn deepened. The air grew cold. Rowan had been at Iron Main Hold for 8 months. It felt like a lifetime and like no time at all. He had a place here. People knew him, respected him. He could walk through the hold without feeling like an intruder, could speak Orcish well enough to handle daily tasks, could sit at the great table and not feel entirely out of place. He had built a life, different from the one he had imagined, different from the solitary existence in the cabin, but a life nonetheless, full, purposeful, connected. Then the winter came, and with it the light. The first time he saw it, he thought he was dreaming. He woke before dawn in his quarters. Something had pulled him from sleep, some quality of the darkness that felt different. He went to the window. The valley was bathed in light that should not exist. Blue-green, luminous, not bright like day, but present like fire. It settled over the snow-covered slopes and made everything look like it was lit from within. The trees cast shadows that were violet. The stone of the hold seemed to glow. He stood transfixed, barely breathing, watching something that his mind struggled to categorize. It was not Aurora Borealis, wrong color, wrong movement. It was something else, something specific to this place, this latitude, this valley surrounded by these particular peaks. He heard his door open, did not turn, knew who it was by the weight of footsteps. Thessa came to stand beside him. She was wrapped in a heavy robe, hair loose, face soft with sleep. She looked at the light with him. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, she said, "You see it. I see it. I have looked at this light since I was very small, since before I understood what it meant to be Matriarch. It has been the one constant through everything. My mother dying, taking power, the ambush, running, finding you, all of it. And every winter, the light comes back." Her voice was quiet, reverent almost. "I have never shared it with someone seeing it for the first time. Never had someone to show. Never thought I would." Rowan wanted to say something about beauty, about privilege, about gratitude, but the words felt inadequate, so he just reached out and took her hand. The human way, palm to palm, fingers interlaced. She held his hand. They stood at the window in the blue-green light, two people from different worlds who had found each other in the worst circumstances and built something neither had expected. They stood until the light began to shift, to fade back toward normal dawn colors. The transition was gradual, reluctant, like the valley did not want to let go of the magic. When it was gone, when the sun rose in its ordinary way and made ordinary shadows, Thessa turned to him. "Thank you for being here to see it with me. Thank you for bringing me here." She smiled, leaned down, kissed his forehead, gentle, a gesture that was affection and claim and promise all at once. Then she left to begin her day. Rowan stood at the window a while longer, looking at ordinary light on ordinary snow, but remembering the blue-green, knowing it would come again, knowing he would be here to see it, knowing that was a kind of home he had never expected to find. Spring came to the mountains slowly, grudgingly, with false promises and sudden reversals. But it came, and with it came the equinox, the traditional time for bonding ceremonies. Thessa proposed formally, not in private, in council, with all the chiefs present. She stood and announced her intention to bond with the ranger, to formalize what everyone already understood, to make permanent what had been building for a year. There was discussion, not opposition, exactly. Questions about precedent, about tradition, about what it meant for a matriarch to bond with a human, about the political implications, about succession, about a dozen things that mattered in ways Rowan did not fully understand but could see were important. Aldrich spoke in favor, Gareth spoke in favor. Even Garrick, with his usual caution, said he saw no reason to oppose if the matriarch was certain. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Approval granted. Rowan sent word to Darby, invited anyone who wanted to come. He expected no one. Who would travel 3 days into Orc territory for a wedding they had not known was possible? But 3 people came. Mrs. Hadley from the general store, Father Thomas from the church, and old Silas the trapper who had taught Rowan about the forest when he first started living alone. 3 humans, representing his past, his origins, the world he had come from. They arrived at Ironmain Hold and were treated with careful courtesy, shown to guest quarters, fed well, protected. Thessa made it clear they were under her personal guarantee. Anyone who insulted or harmed them would answer to her. Mrs. Hadley was overwhelmed. Father Thomas was fascinated. Silas just grunted and said he had seen stranger things in his time, though he could not immediately think of what. The ceremony was held in the Great Hall. 200 orcs, 3 humans, all witnessing something that had never happened before. A matriarch bonding with someone outside her species. The hall had been decorated. Iron Mane clan colors. Banners showing the history of matriarchs stretching back 7 generations. But also flowers from the valley. Wildflowers and colors that reminded Rowan of his mother's garden. The blend was visible, intentional. The binding cord had been prepared according to tradition, but with modifications. Woven from mountain wool dyed in clan colors, but also woven through it dried wildflowers from Montana lowlands. Sage, columbine, Indian paintbrush, the plants of Rowan's homeland. The ceremony was co-officiated. Elder lawkeeper Sorna stood in her formal robes, ancient, severe, keeper of tradition going back centuries. And next to her, looking entirely out of place and entirely committed, stood Father Thomas in his simple black with his worn Bible. They had worked out the structure together, blending traditions, finding common ground, respecting both cultures while creating something new. Thessa stood in formal matriarch dress, dark leather embossed with the Iron Mane seal, her hair braided in the complex pattern that took 2 people an hour to complete, the ring on her finger catching light. She looked powerful, formal, every inch the leader of a mountain clan. Rowan wore what he had, clean shirt, his better coat, his mother's pressed herbs in his pocket. The things from the shelf represented in what he carried. He looked small next to her, underdressed, out of place. But he stood straight and met her eyes, and that was what mattered. Sorna spoke first, in Orcish, ancient words about bonding and clan and the continuation of blood and tradition. She spoke the ancient words with weight. Then Father Thomas spoke, in English, about marriage's covenant, about 2 becoming one, about love and commitment in the building of family. He spoke from his Bible and from his heart, and his voice cracked once when he talked about unlikely unions that succeeded because they were built on truth. Then came the vows. They had written these together, agonized over every word, wanting to honor both traditions while being honest about what this actually was. Thessa spoke first, in English so the humans could understand, but also so the orcs would hear her commit in the language of her chosen partner. I stand before witnesses to speak truth. When you came to my door, I was broken. I had failed my people, lost my warriors, lost myself. You gave me shelter. You asked nothing. You expected nothing. You simply offered what you had because it was right. You taught me that strength includes gentleness, that leadership can share weight, that I could be vulnerable and still be strong. She paused. Her voice was absolutely steady, but her eyes held emotion. I choose you as my bonded, not because you are perfect, because you are real, not because you make me more powerful, because you make me more whole. I swear to stand with you, to protect you, to build with you, as long as we both live. The hall was silent. The weight of a matriarch's vow was not a small thing. Then Rowan spoke. He had practiced this, worked with Marin on pronunciation. But in the moment he chose to speak first in Orcish, rough, imperfect, but his. I stand before witnesses to speak truth. The words came out awkward but clear. Then he switched to English. When I opened my door, I thought I had nothing to offer. I'd been living small because the world had taught me that was safest. You showed me I was wrong. You showed me that what I considered small was actually everything. That kindness without expectation matters. That being present matters. That choosing to stand with someone is itself a kind of strength. He took a breath. I choose you as my bonded, not because you need me, because we are better together than apart. Not because I want to be saved, because I want to build something that matters. I swear to stand with you, to support you, to be honest with you, as long as we both live. Both. Sorna and Father Thomas together lifted the binding cord, approached, wrapped it around their joined hands. Orcish style, 3 loops, each representing something. Past, present, future. Sorna spoke. What is bound here is bound by clan law, by blood, by tradition, witnessed and sealed. Father Thomas spoke. What God has joined together, let no one separate. Witnessed and blessed. The cord was tied, secured, would be kept by both of them, a physical representation of what had been sworn. The hall erupted, weapons on stone, voices raised, the percussive acknowledgment that something significant had occurred. The three humans clapped. Mrs. Hadley was crying. Silas looked satisfied. Father Thomas beamed. Aldrich stepped forward, placed his fist over his heart. You honor us, Matriarch. You honor tradition by expanding it. You honor Iron Main by showing we can grow. Garrick was next. His gesture was smaller, more reluctant, but present. You have chosen strength over tradition. That is leadership. Then came the feast. Food from both cultures. Orc game roasted with traditional spices, but also breads and stews and dishes that Mrs. Hadley had helped the kitchen prepare using Montana recipes. The blend was everywhere. Music played, drums and deep horns, but also a fiddle that Father Thomas had brought. The sounds clashed at first, then found harmony. Rowan was asked to dance in the orc style. He tried, failed spectacularly. Thessa laughed, that full, unguarded laugh that she had learned to allow. People saw their matriarch laugh, and something in the hold relaxed. If she could laugh, if she could be this happy, then maybe this was actually going to work. Late in the night, after most had retired, after the humans had been escorted to their quarters, after the hall had mostly emptied, Thessa and Rowan stood together at the entrance, looking out at the valley, at the stars, at the life they had built. I was afraid, she said quietly, when I came back to find you, afraid you would say no, afraid even if you said yes, it would not work, afraid I was asking too much. You were asking everything, but I had nothing better to do with everything. She smiled, leaned against him, the casual physical affection that they had been learning. That came slowly for both of them. Your mother would have liked this, I think. She would have loved this, would have found it exactly the kind of impossible, wonderful thing she believed in. I wish I could have met her. She would have taught you about herbs, would have made you terrible tea and told you stories, and probably tried to feed you too much. She sounds perfect. She was, in her way. They stood together, bonded now, formally, publicly, bound by cords and words and witnesses, but also bound by something deeper. The connection that had formed in a winter cabin, the trust that had been earned in small moments, the building of something that neither had expected, but both had chosen. The stars turned, the valley slept, and two people from impossible worlds stood together at the threshold of a future they would build one day at a time. 1 year later, the valley was prosperous. Trade routes established with 3 human settlements. Goods flowing both directions. Iron Main furs and metalwork going south. Human grains and textiles coming north. The economy stable. The people secure. Thessa stood on the ramparts looking out at what she had built. Not just defended. Built. Her mother had been a warrior matriarch. Had held territory through strength. Thessa was building something different. A network. An alliance, a future that did not depend on constant vigilance, but on mutual benefit. Rowan appeared beside her, carrying a report from the Southern Scouts. Progress on the new trading post. Numbers, details. He had become essential to the operations. Not just ranger now, advisor. Bridge between worlds. The person who could translate not just language, but culture. Need, opportunity. The council wants to expand the southern routes, he said. Open up passage through Bitterroot Pass. Aldrich thinks it is too ambitious. Garrick thinks it is necessary. What do you think? I think Aldrich worries too much and Garrick dreams too big. I think the middle path is probably correct. Start small, 1 caravan, test the route, build from there. She nodded. Tell them that is my decision. He smiled. I will deliver your wisdom. It is not wisdom. It is your wisdom spoken through me. Then we are doing this correctly. Below them, the whole bustled with activity. Young warriors trained under Gareth's command. Scouts reported to Marin, who had become senior tracker at age 19. Crafters worked. Traders negotiated. Children played in the courtyard. Life, messy, complicated, good. Thessa had been matriarch for 5 years now, had survived assassination, betrayal, war, had rebuilt stronger, had expanded territory and influence, had formed alliances that would outlast her, was building legacy. But more than that, she was no longer alone. She looked at Rowan, small beside her, would always be small, would always be different, would always draw questions from those who did not understand, but present, committed, her partner in every way that mattered. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The cabin, the solitude, the simple life?" He considered. "Sometimes in small moments. When things get complicated and I remember what it was like when my biggest problem was whether I had enough firewood. But no, not really. That life was safe, but it was not alive. This is alive. Even though it is hard, especially because it is hard, easy is not the same as good." She reached out, took his hand, the gesture that had become theirs, palm to palm, human style. She had learned it from him, had made it her own. "I am glad you opened your door that night. I'm glad you knocked." They stood together on the ramparts, matriarch and ranger, orc and human, two people who should not have worked but did, two worlds that should not have touched but had, building something new, something unprecedented, something that would outlast both of them. In the distance, storm clouds gathered. There would be challenges ahead. Always were, but they would face them together. That was what mattered. Not that life was easy, that they were not alone in facing it. The sun moved toward the horizon. The valley settled into evening routines. Smoke rose from hearths. Guards changed shifts. The day ended the way days end, with work done or left undone, with problems solved or postponed, with life continuing in its relentless forward motion. Thessa looked at it all and thought about her mother, about the weight she had carried alone, about the choices she had made that had shaped everything, about the loneliness that had defined her rule. And she thought, "I did it differently. I chose differently. I let someone help me carry the weight, and we are stronger for it." That night in the private chambers they shared, she spoke into the darkness. Rowan was nearly asleep beside her, but she needed to say it, needed him to hear. "When I came to your door, I had nothing. I had failed my people, lost my warriors, was running from everything. I asked only to not die on your doorstep. You gave me everything instead. Shelter, safety, time to heal, some trust when I had none. Kindness without cost." She paused. "I learned something that winter, something my mother never learned. That true strength is not carrying everything alone. It is knowing when to accept help, when to trust, when to let someone else see you broken and not use it against you." Rowan was quiet. She thought maybe he was asleep. Then his voice came from the darkness. "I learned something too, that what I thought was nothing was actually everything. That I had been living small, not because I had nothing to offer, but because I was afraid to try my mind, that opening a door can change everything." "We saved each other," she said. "We did. That is not weakness. No, that is wisdom." Outside, the wind moved through the valley. Inside the hold, 200 people slept or worked or lived their lives. And in one chamber, two people lay in darkness and understood that what they had built was not perfect, but it was real. Not easy, but worth it. Not simple, but lasting. Thessa closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems, new weight to carry. But tonight she was not alone, had not been alone for over a year, would not be alone tomorrow or the day after or any day as long as they both lived. She had been a matriarch who fell, who failed, who ran, who arrived at a stranger's door with nothing to offer. She had become a matriarch who rebuilt, who learned, who stood, who formed alliances and expanded territory and built peace, who carried weight but shared it, who led but partnered, who honored tradition but grew it. That was legacy, not the battles won or the enemies defeated, but the new thing built, the unprecedented thing, the thing that would outlast her and show others that there were more ways to be strong than the ways that came before. She slept and dreamed of blue-green light, of mountain valleys, of a cabin in winter, of hands joined palm to palm, of a future built one day at a time by two people who should not have worked but did, 5 years after the bonding, 10 years after Thessa took power, the valley had changed. 3 trade posts operated year-round. Human merchants regularly visited. Some had even established permanent residences in structures built at Iron Main's edges. Mixed communities, not integrated exactly, but coexisting, learning each other's ways, building relationships. A young orc warrior asked Rowan one day how it started, this connection between worlds. Rowan thought about it, then told the story simply. A woman came to a door in a snowstorm, asked only to not die on the doorstep, was given shelter, time, trust. Both were broken in different ways. Both needed something the other had. Both chose to build rather than hide. That is all, the young warrior asked. No great battle, no prophecy, no destiny. That is all, just 2 people choosing to help each other. Everything else came from that choice. The young warrior seemed disappointed. Rowan understood. People wanted grand stories, wanted meaning to come from dramatic moments. But real meaning came from small choices made consistently. From doors opened when they could have stayed closed. From trust given when there was no reason to give it. From building when it would have been easier to hide. That was the story, the only story that mattered. Everything else was just details. Thessa ruled for 23 years, built alliances that reshaped the mountain territories, established trade that brought prosperity, raised a generation that knew cooperation was possible because they had seen it work, left a legacy that was not about the battles she won, but the peace she built. When she eventually passed the leadership to her chosen successor, she did so with Rowan at her side. Both older, both tired, both satisfied. They had done the work, built the thing, proved it was possible. They retired to a small cabin on the edge of the valley, not as isolated as Rowan's original home, but quieter than the hold, a place to rest, to grow herbs, to watch the blue-green winter light and remember everything they had survived and built. On a shelf by the window sat the items they had carried through, everything: the wooden bird his mother had carved, the copper coin with the hole through it, the stone guardian Thessa had made that first winter, the pressed herbs from his mother's garden, the wooden hawk Rowan had carved in the months of waiting, and a piece of the binding cord from their ceremony. Small things, but they held the weight of a life built together. They were proof that what looked like nothing was actually everything. On clear nights, they sat together and looked at stars. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they just sat. The companionship of people who had been through everything together and did not need words to understand. One night late in winter, Thessa said, "Do you regret any of it? The difficulty, the compromise, the never quite belonging?" Rowan thought about it. "I regret nothing. I found you, found purpose, found home. Everything else was just the price. And it was worth it. I regret nothing either. I was alone. You taught me I did not have to be. That was worth everything." They sat in the blue-green light, 2 people from impossible worlds who had built an improbable life, who had proven that sometimes the most unlikely connections are the strongest, that sometimes what looks like weakness is actually wisdom, that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to let someone help you stand. The light faded. Dawn came. They went inside to begin another day. Together, the way they had faced every day for decades, the way they would face every remaining day until one of them was left to carry on alone. But that was future. Tonight was present. And in the present, they were together. They were home. They had built something that mattered. That was enough. That was everything. The fire burned, the valley slept, and 2 people who had saved each other rested in the knowledge that they had done the work that mattered, had built the legacy that would outlast them, had proven that even the most broken people can heal if given shelter and time and someone who believes in them. That was the story. That was the truth. That was the winter they would always remember. When everything changed because someone knocked on a door and someone chose to open it, that was enough. That was everything.